and they have to read the text. They can do this in pairs, they can do it in small groups, and decide who is who. Now, if we go to options, what sort of options do we have? For example, once they've done the reading activity, you can give a set of different questions. They can make up questions on one or on all the singers, and then they can interview a partner. Another possibility would be to imagine a day in the life of one or all of the singers and then describe it. Another possibility, if you have technology at hand, is to research on the internet and add information to these biographies. That is not always possible, but it's a very good alternative. Once everybody's done their alternative and at the end of the class, it might be a good idea to vote for the favorite song from these singers and prepare a singing activity for another class, if it is a class of students who like music, and they can come up with alternatives. Okay, here we have a listening activity. So it's just an ordinary listening activity. They're very short little passages. The idea of the activity, the aim, is to be able to listen and to speak and to review a text, to review preparing for a test, for example. So, or it could be used also as a diagnostic situation. Here what we have are dates, days of the week, telling the time, and numbers. So they're going to be very short little conversations, and you'll just have to decide if it's A or B, B or C, A or B, or A or B really in all of them. We won't be listening to the CD at this moment. I'll tell you at what moment. So before listening, what are we going to do? We're going to try and elicit general questions on the date, on telling the time, on the days of the week, and put them onto the board. Then in groups, in small groups, they should come up with 3 questions. Out of those 3 questions, the secretaries can write them on the board and then refer to them, just one, because 3 will be too many. So each group just writes 1 question on the board, and then you do the listening. The listening is the following. So what can we do while listening, which is usually different to what normally happens? For the slower ones who need extra help, the option is to give them the tape script. We have the tape script here. So they can go through the dialogues together with the tape script. Obviously, if you're going to use this as an exam, no. But if you're using it for a review, then they can use the tape script. On the other hand, what other things can we do after listening? Right. Here we have a list of activities that you can do. They can either answer questions, and they can create their own questions, and even the faster ones should try to remember the original dialogues that were in the tape. This would give them an extra challenge, and then they can always role play it with their friends. How about writing activities? Everybody loves stories, but everybody loves being told stories. How about writing stories? How are we going to get our students, young, medium, old, or whatever age, to write stories? One activity I found has always worked is the famous one from sentence to story. So what? How do we go about this? Okay, so what's the aim of the activity? The aim of the activity is to develop writing, all right? And again, in this case, to develop group cohesion, because they're going to do things in groups. So how do we go about it? How do we start? All right, we can write some sentences on the board randomly. I'll give you some examples of sentences, for example. There's a list of sentences there for beginners, and there's another one for the intermediate level. And they're all related. For example, in the first one for the beginners, it has reference to a little boy who was hungry. It has a reference to an old lady, and that she made some soup, and she gave him the soup, and right. They're all short sentences related to the same. So what do we do with those sentences? We can hand them out in the groups, make sure that they know the language to do it, and they start grouping the sentences, putting them together, maybe adding names to them, because in the list I've just showed you, it talks about a boy, it talks about an old lady, but they don't have any names. So maybe the possibility here would be to give them names. Now, if it talks about a soup, then they could try and think of what kind of soup. Or they could think if it's a big bowl or a small bowl of soup. Or what did the soup have in it? Did it have meat only, or did it have meat and vegetables? Or did it have meat, vegetables, and noodles? So they carry on by adding and adding to their stories, these sentences. Okay, once the time is up, they read out their stories. Maybe the one representative from each group reads out the story, and after that, you can get the whole class voting on the most interesting story of the lot. Once this one is decided, it can either be dictated or written out for next class. Everybody rewrites the chosen one, adding more to it, either individually or in other groups. Now, how can we continue this? The wall newspaper. Everybody loves having their writing put up on the wall. So please remember, read carefully and remember the activity. A speaking activity, what can we do? Remember we had a reading activity with the text on music? Okay, so what I did here was I cut out the sentences in half, gave one half to the student, the other half to somebody else. They put their hand in a bag and pulled it out. And now they have to go around the classroom looking for their other half. With that, once they have made up their sentence, they all gather together, and they can stand in line according to the paragraph they've collected. But the explanation is all here for you to be able to follow it. Now, rounding off ideas. Okay, we have adapting materials. Here's a dictation that has been adapted for 4 different levels. Each one has a few more words in it. So the very fast finishers, you can dictate the whole text, while the ones who find it more complicated, you can dictate a text with much less words that they have to complete. What's a multi-skill activity? Well, this would be where they practice their speaking, where they practice their, in this case it was learning some new vocabulary and reviewing some old vocabulary as well. And they have to practice their listening, obviously, with the speaking. Take care and read carefully the follow-up options so that all activities have different ways of